it's always difficult with these things. I have included some images which are some people may find a little bit distressing, but believe me, it's no more distressing than I find them. I've not included, or probably the one that's the most kind of ugly, if you like. I've made it not that recognizable, but it's something I've kind of thought about quite a lot, and I think that to a certain degree it's worthwhile sharing the whole experience and kind of laying bare, if you like, the potential consequences of having an accident in the surf, in the sea. For those of you that don't know me, a little bit about me, because after this happened, I wrote a little article that weirdly, just whilst I was in hospital, kind of went viral, and it appeared all over the world in different newspapers, which was bizarre. And there was quite a lot of chat on social media, and people, I've never been in that sort of position before, but people seem to kind of make all sorts of assertions. This guy obviously doesn't know what he's doing. He's an idiot. What was he doing? Paddleboarding in the surf and all of this sort of stuff. And I don't claim to be any expert at all at stand-up paddleboarding or at surfing or anything like that, but I'm not a complete beginner. So just a little bit in terms of my background. I grew up in Northern Ireland, in Ballymena, and I've been involved in outdoor education, outdoor activities kind of my whole life. I'm very, very fortunate to go and help out at an outdoor centre called Ardclinus Activity Centre, which is in Cushendall in the North Coast, at age 14. And so since then, I've been really involved in outdoor activities, and not just surfing, but a whole range of things. So I've got a reasonable background, and in the surf and the sea environment, I've got a real passion for being in the water, and I've surfed for many years. I'm still rubbish at it. If I just did one thing, at least I might be half good at it, but I really enjoy it, and I spent a lot of time in the sea, and I've windsurfed and been involved in surf lifesaving for quite a lot of years as well. And from an attitude point of view, I work in the outdoor industry as an instructor, certainly initially, and still do instruct, and then as a trainer later on, and within college, university settings, teaching, I guess more theoretical aspects of it as well. Although I'm from Northern Ireland, I live in Cornwall now, in a beautiful village called Portreath, and we've got a beach in the village here, but Gwytheon, where this particular incident happened, is only just, I guess it's 5 minutes drive from here, if it's busy. So it's only just down the road. It's my local location. I know it very well, and I've spent a lot of hours and a lot of days surfing down there. So I guess I'll let this play in the background, but it just so happened that on this particular day, I had a GoPro on, and the good thing about that is that you can get a sense of kind of what it was like. It was not unlike today, lovely sunny day. I'd actually been working in the office all day, and I've put a message out to a couple of mates going, does anybody fancy going for a surf this evening? It looks really nice, and it was 5 stars on Magic Suite. It was looking really beautiful, and everybody else, a lot of my mates are work dodgers, so they'd already been out during the day. But one of my mates, Costa, got back saying, "Yeah, I'm well up for it." Now, I would normally be on a surfboard, but Costa is really into sporting, so I took a surf paddleboard and met him to go for a surf. And actually the surf was forecast to be pretty big. I was quite relieved when we got down there, and it was kind of not particularly big at all. It was a couple of foot, really, really clean, really, really nice. As you can see from the video, just lots of fun, one wave after another. After about an hour or so, he said he was heading in. Now, it was a really long period swell, so it's really a long time where it was really flat. The set would come in, and although the waves weren't huge, they were perfectly formed and fairly punchy, and really, really nice. So he went in, and I waited for a last wave, because I knew I had to go home as well, to kind of catch the wave off the next set. So he was long gone. I picked up a wave and surfed it in, surfed right along the bay, turned back, went left, kind of back to where I came from in terms of along the beach. And just as the wave was about to break, I was in the shoulder and there was a shoulder coming towards me. I enthusiastically bottom turned to kind of come off with the wave as it was breaking. And I still, to this point, don't really know what happened. But within it, somewhere along the way, I think I leaned a bit too far back. I fell in the water and the board appeared to come down with the lip and hit me pretty much in the face. So when I came to the surface of the water, first of all, I knew it was a really big hit. It was, I've never experienced it, but I imagine that if somebody took a baseball bat and just hit you as hard as they could in the face, that was the experience. And it happened under the water. So this wasn't on the surface of the water. I was underneath the water and the lip of the wave must have broken and taken the board down with it. So it hit me underneath the water. And it was pretty traumatic. So the first thing that came to mind was I knew immediately that I had to get back onto my board again because it'd been quite a big bang, and I was concerned that I would quite likely pass out. And although I'd surfed quite a long way in, with the long period swell, I was still quite a long way from the shore, probably still over 100 meters from the beach, and certainly well out of my depth still. So at that point, the first thing I realized that I needed to was to get up on the board so that if I did pass out, at least I was floating on something. And actually, it was such a lovely evening. There was loads of other surfers out, lots and lots of people out. So I started kind of screaming and shouting to get people's attention. I didn't really know what I wanted them to do, but I wanted people to know that I was in trouble and where I was. So if I did pass out and fall off the board, at least somebody knew where I was. I'd managed to, the paddle was still there, so I picked it up and waved it around to just try and get somebody's attention. There was a guy paddling, there was lots of people around, and I have no idea whether they kind of saw me or heard me or not, but there's a guy paddling out on his surfboard, and as he paddled past, he just said, "What do you want?" And I just said, "I need to get back to the beach." He kept on paddling out, and on reflection, it was the start of the next set coming in. So there was nothing that he could have done. You know, if he'd come over to me, he would have been putting himself at risk. But that meant that as the next wave broke and hit me, I was able to hold onto the board, and that wave took me back into shore. And fortunately, I managed to kind of hang onto the board and stay on it. So when I got back to shore, I had kind of come round a little bit, but luckily my mate Costa had come back down the beach. He'd seen that he'd watched me on the last wave, saw what he described as what looked like quite a nasty wipeout. Saw that I hadn't got back up on the board, so he came back down to see if I was all right. And there was two other guys who were, I think, getting into the water who came down to help as well. So you can kind of tell from the video that it was there's quite a lot of blood. I knew that I had broken my nose, but I hadn't really any idea that I'd done anything more than that. And these guys really helpful. They carried my board and paddle back up the beach. And walking up the beach after being hit in the head was a really weird sensation because I kept on ended up on my knees. And I don't remember ever going to my knees. I just remember having to get up off them, and I walk along, and next thing I was on my knees again. It's slightly bizarre, um, but I was kind of feeling pretty sick, and but I knew that I had to get, first of all, up off the beach, and I need to get back to the van. When I get back to the van, then my wife was down in Heels, so not very far away. I can get onto her, and she can come and pick me up and take me home. I knew I wasn't in any fit state to drive at that point. So we got, and if anybody's been to Gwythian, when the tide's out, it's quite a long walk up, so it took quite a while to get there. And I said it was lovely evening. The surf was really, really good. So the car park at Gwythian at the top of the cliffs was ram-packed, absolutely full of people. So we got back up there. I explained to Costa how to get in the van, to get the first aid kit, and to phone my wife. So he did that. And I was, the wetsuit I was wearing was pretty new. So I knew as soon as she arrived, she would start cutting my wetsuit. I didn't really want to do that. So I managed to get out of my wetsuit, which on reflection, I'm not quite sure I managed to do it because I was in a bit of a state. And unfortunately for everybody in the car park, I was bollock naked. I didn't have anything on underneath my wetsuit. So one of the things that I wasn't sure about is why did nobody approach me in the car park to help? And it might be because I had blood all over my face and was walking around naked. But apart from that, I managed to get some clothes on and get sorted out. So Costa phoned my wife Sal, who's a doctor, to come and give me a hand. And he looked in the first aid kit. And I don't know if you guys, Chris, can you see me there?
Yep, I can see that.
So in the first aid kit, I have a couple of these here, which is like a roller dressing, like a field dressing, if you like. And he unrolled this thing here, and whoops. And to be honest, it wasn't really going to do a great deal in terms of the injury. This is a photo whilst I was in the van, just waiting for what was going on. So actually, this didn't really do anything. It didn't even really slow down the bleeding, as it were. There was quite a lot coming out, and I weirdly, as soon as I knew that my wife was coming, I just kind of gave up, and I still can't believe to that point where I'd had a big bang in the head, we managed to walk all the way up the beach, got all the way to the car park, into the van, got my wetsuit off, and got some clothes back on. And then as soon as I knew that I was felt I was safe, I completely deteriorated. I ended up feeling really nauseous, really dizzy, and all I could do is just sit on the side of the van, and felt really, really bad. And chatting to some of the RNLI guys afterwards, apparently it's pretty common for when they get to a casualty, they'll paddle out on the board, and there'll be somebody who's been in the water maybe for several minutes, and they've been thrashing around to keep the head above the water, and as soon as they get to the pier under the water, it's to be an innate sense that whenever you feel like you're safe or you're saved, actually we just submit ourselves, we just give up. And so that was really strange for me, because I didn't think that was going to happen. I went from being independent to becoming a dependent casualty. So from that point on, I was pretty useless. I couldn't help myself. And reflecting on it afterwards, it was really, it's really, really important that if you have an accident, that actually it's your responsibility to get yourself out of it as much as you can. You need to, first of all, make sure that you stay afloat. So whatever you've got, get on top of it. Next thing, you've got to get to shore. And then when you get to shore, you've got to get above the high water mark, because once you collapse and you can't really help yourself, you're a real pain in the arse to move anywhere. So that was a revelation for me. Also, what was interesting was I was a good 20 minutes sat on the side of the van, and there was lots and lots of people, and a couple of ladies came up to say, can I do anything to help? And they had sort of tissues and stuff like that, but there wasn't really much they could do. But I think there was generally a sense that, there's a guy in the corner, he looks like he's had a nasty accident, but there's lots of people, so somebody will do something about that. And I think perhaps everybody thought somebody would do something, and the result, not really many people did that much. That's not a reflection on them. I just think it's worthwhile keeping that in mind so that you feel confident to step forward in that situation. When I got to hospital, well, when my wife arrived, she examined me and decided I needed to go to hospital straight away. And actually, the quickest way to do that was in her car rather than, I think, in an ambulance. So she took us there. And the nurses and the doctors in the A&E in Trillis were absolutely amazing. Took me pretty much straight through. Had a scan, identified the injuries that I had, and dealt with me, treated me appropriately. So that was very unpleasant physically, but very reassuring that they were there and able to help. I went into A&E. I ended up in A&E in a separate ward or in a separate room for 2 days, I think it was, and then they moved me into a normal ward for a couple of days after that. And actually, it's amazing how quickly the body heals. So after what had been a fairly traumatic injury, the swelling kind of went down a bit, and I felt much better. The morphine helped with that quite a lot, then it was down to working out what they're going to do about this. And so although I knew I'd broken my nose, it turned out I'd done quite a lot more than that. So I've broken both my eye sockets. I kind of, I don't know if you can kind of see it, but this side of my face here was kind of all pushed in. So I had a fracture in the skull, and as a result of that, I had a CSF fluid, kind of a constant leak coming out from that, which is a weird sensation. And the decision was to come back. It was amazing. They got me booked in the following Monday. It was just a few days later with a maxillofacial surgeon and a brain surgeon and neurosurgeon to put me back together again. And the operation was 9 hours with the two surgeons, and they did an amazing job, but it was pretty uncomfortable afterwards. I'd never had a general anesthetic before, but when you come out of it, and I don't really remember this, but when you come out of it, the nurse that was there had to ask me some general questions to see if I was kind of functioning correctly. And one of the questions she asked was, who's the president of America? And I apparently responded by saying it's I can't even remember who it is now. Donald Trump, and then followed by some very colourful language about what I thought about him. So that was quite reassuring from that point of view. After that was where I had quite a long time to kind of sit and think about what had happened and what I'd learned from it, and what can I take away from it. And I think it's really important when these things happen that you take positive things away from it. The first thing I wanted to do within the first day was to be able to stand up and eventually to be able to go to the toilet myself, because I was feeling pretty rough and pretty beaten up. So those little goals were really useful, just getting out of bed and then getting out of the ward that I was in, and then being able to go to the toilet myself, and then eventually working up to actually walking back and forth in the ward. And that was really, really important in terms of recovery, and not just physically as well. And I think it's really important to remember that moving is independence. We've got to keep moving. After that, went home and had the most amazing realizations of lots of senses, the importance of fresh air, the importance of moving around, and lots of different stimuluses like sun and sunlight is so important when you've been kind of cooped up in bed for quite a long time. And all of this stuff was really important. So even though it wasn't really necessarily supposed to be done on the beach, it was the benefit of that just for the soul was really, really good, really, really important. After all of that, you wouldn't really expect after that to look exactly like you did before you went into it. But as I say, the surgeons did an amazing job, and the surgery they performed was slightly wasn't initially what I had imagined. But when I went to see the consultant and he explained what they were going to do, he went through the process, which I'm not going to go into detail about, but it suffice to say, they didn't go in this way. They kind of removed all of the tissue and did it directly onto the skull and then put everything back again. And it was a weird thing talking to him about it because he was really enthusiastic, and I'm really glad he was enthusiastic. But halfway through it, I had to stop and say, hang on a minute, this is my face you're talking about. But as it turned out, my wife was really pleased with the result at the end of it. Once we removed the bandages, you could see that they'd done a really good job. So what did I learn from this whole thing? First of all, I learned that it's really important. I should also said that I've been involved in surf life saving a long time, and I teach a bit of first aid and all that sort of stuff. It's different when you're the casualty. It's really easy when you've got a room full of people. You're saying, well, if somebody has an accident, make sure it's safe for you, and then make sure that your group are safe, and then if the casualty's face down, all this stuff. That's easy as a teacher, but actually when you're a casualty, all that goes out the window. You're just completely. I guess you're thinking about keeping your airway clear. You think about getting back on the board, but keep those things at the top of your mind, because if you just give up at that point, you'll drown, and then that's no good to anybody. So getting back on the board, getting back to shore, and getting to a place of safety is really, really important. I've definitely taken away that if I have an accident again, or if I'm with somebody who has an accident, that if you have to shout and swear at them, do whatever you need to do until you get them to that place of safety. Because when they get there and they feel safe, they will collapse, and then they're just a lump, and you're not going to be able to move them. So that's really important. The other thing to mention is I had a first aid kit in my van, but it was for the injuries I had, it was just inadequate. But don't overthink things. Do the obvious. As soon as my wife arrived, the first thing that she did when she saw the blood was reached into the back of the van, got a towel out, and wrapped it around my head. Really makes me look really stupid. I look pretty stupid as it was, but actually it massively reduced the blood loss. And so where my first aid kit wasn't good enough, you can use stuff that's in your car. You can still use stuff that's in other people's car. I mean, God forbid, if it was really nasty, we all have a leash. And if somebody had a really bad cut and you're really worried about the fact that they may not survive long enough to get them to hospital, you could use a leash as a makeshift tourniquet. There is things at the beach. You don't necessarily need specialist equipment for this. When Sal arrived to see me, when she arrived after Costa Calder, I was at the point of collapsing just out the side of the van. So she put me on the ground. So there's really simple steps that people can take to make a big difference. So step forward, be brave. Yeah, what can I do to help? If they look like they're going to fall over, put them on the ground before they do. If they're bleeding, do what you can to stop the bleeding. Use a towel, use whatever you've got to do that. So off the back of this, I had an amazing response from friends who sent me messages, well wishers, and a number of people saying, is there anything I can do to help? And I really appreciate the friends who came to visit me and all the rest of it. But the things that I've just explained, whilst they sound really obvious sat in your living room or sat in your obvious, they aren't necessarily that obvious when you're at the beach. And I think that it's the really simple things that will make a big difference. So got thinking about Surf Life Saving. I spoke to Surf Life Saving GB about trying to do some training through the clubs at the beaches. I spoke to the RNLI. They actually had a program in place called Surf Survival course, but it was quite involved. It was like a whole day's course, and there was quite a lot of content in it. And chatting to different people, it appeared to me that there was kind of a bit of a gap. if you do, if you're involved in outdoor sports, if you're involved in teaching surfing and teaching paddleboard and all the rest of it, you do these courses and you get educated and you pick up skills from experts. That's great. But actually, the people I know who surf, who I see in the water regularly, they don't. Most of them don't work in the outdoor industry. Most of them are plumbers or teachers or builders, and actually, they go for a surf first thing in the morning on the way to work, or if it's good, they'll stop on the way home from work. There's no lifeguards on the beach then. They know how to surf. They're very generally very good. They spend their whole lives surfing. So they don't want to go and do a lifeguard course because it's going to take several days, and it's more than they want to do. This is their leisure time. So they also, because they tend to be pretty skilled, very rarely do any of them have any problems. Very rarely do they have an incident or an accident. But when they do, it tends to be pretty serious, either because of the nature of the accident they're had, or because actually they're in conditions which are generally more challenging. So maybe slightly bigger waves or more remote locations, things like that. So got a group of people together, including Matt, who I see is on here now. He's a lifeguard supervisor. And we got together, put our heads together and came up with an idea that actually, could we do something good just in a 2-hour workshop, which could run in an evening or a Saturday morning or something like that, where people could come along. It's not a massive commitment. It doesn't cost a lot of money. In fact, it's all been free, been delivered by volunteers, and just teach some basic skills that would put you in a position to help other people. So the idea isn't to teach people how to rescue somebody. It's about, if your mate next to you has an accident, what can you do to help them? You're already there. They're right next to you. It's not about entering the water to go and paddle out to somebody. If you want to learn that and good skills to do, go and do a lifeguard course. This is more about what can somebody in the water help another person with, whether they're a paddleboarder or a surfer or a windsurfer or whatever it is. So we came up with this idea of surfers helping surfers, and last year, so last year obviously was the first time we did it, and we had a really good uptake. And interestingly, the photo is of a ladies surf club at Fistral, and the uptake's been amazing, and it's worked really well with groups and clubs. So we had just over 300 people last year who went through and attended a Surfers Helping Surfers workshop. We run them in St Agnes, at Fistral, at Portreath, Gwydion. We've run them in Scotland as well. So we've run a few of the workshops. We've teased out kind of what works and what doesn't work. The other thing that was interesting was I was keen to get advice from lots of different people. So we had current RNLI lifeguards. We had people who were surf life saving trainer assessors. We also had a couple of people who work at Trelisk in the A&E department who came along, who contributed as well, who also surf. They appreciate the environment. And so that's been absolutely amazing. And the workshops basically are, well, first of all, we spent some time in the water trying different ways of getting somebody from out back to the inside using a shortboard. A longboard's not so bad, but I have to say, I hadn't really appreciated just how hard that is. If you're surfing and you've got a board, and you've got a casualty who's got a board, it's really, really difficult. And the conclusion we came to is whatever method you use, and I will say there was a lot of very experienced people who attended that meeting, and some of those people had very fixed ideas about what worked and what didn't work. But when we went in the water, that all went out the window because there's so many variables. If you're on the shape of your board, if you're on a fish or you're on an egg, or whether you're on a little high performance shortboard, they all act differently. And whatever you use, it's all pretty rubbish. I have to be honest with you, because if you get on a board with somebody else, what happens to your board? You don't want to get rid of your board because then you've got nothing to float you on. Your board hits you on the way in, all of that stuff. So really, for the purpose of this, what we've done is we've focused on how can we help somebody who is already in the inside. And the best that we could come up with really for rescuing somebody on a shortboard with a shortboard was to put them back on it and shove them into the line up and then pick them up on the inside. There wasn't really much of an easier way to do that. And we tried a lot of different methods, some of which kind of worked. But in terms of sharing that with other people, that's kind of what we came up with. So the Surfers Helping Surfers is basically, it's one workshop. It lasts for 2 hours and there's 3 stations. And each of these stations are manned by people who are really experienced. They've all volunteered their time. Nobody's been paid anything for this. And it's been mostly current RNLI lifeguards and some of the doctors from Trelisk who have volunteered their time. And they've generally been racing to the beach to volunteer their time, having just worked all day, either on the beach or in the hospital, and they've come down and put the time in, which has been absolutely amazing. These workshops there's 3 different workshops. The first one is how to help somebody back to shore and get them up the beach. So it's looking at a little bit of casualty moving and handling and how to get them above the high water mark if the tide's on the way in. The second workshop is about dealing with bleeding and dealing with shock. So it's a bit like I was talking about, using what's around on the beach, how you position the casualty using the natural environment to help deal with shock, and how to protect yourself as best you can as well. And then the final workshop, which for most of the sessions has been run by one of the doctors, is how to do CPR and using AED. Initially, when we started this, we wanted to keep it really, really simple, and we were just doing hands-only CPR, but actually there were so many questions about mouth-to-mouth and all the rest of it. It's not that difficult. We've got all the mannequins to practice it on, so we've been including that as this is how you do it, but actually you need to go and do a first aid course if over and above this in reality. If any of you would like to find out anything more about the project, there's a Facebook page, Surfers Helping Surfers, and I'm afraid it's been very quiet over the winter because I'm supposed to be really busy with work at the minute, like everybody else. But I've got a bit more time now, so I'll try and get a bit more up on there. But any workshops that we're putting on there will be on the Facebook page. If anybody who's listening to this is a lifeguard trainer assessor or has experience in that area and you'd like to get involved, that would be great. I'd really be keen for you to send me a message. What the plan was that this year was that last week I was running 2 workshops in Dunbar in Scotland, and then some of the guys who are trainers up there or surfers who are up there were going to sit in on those workshops, and then they had planned to run some workshops all throughout the summer in Scotland. Going to do the same idea down here, so trying to get people trained up to then deliver it. It's really common sense stuff. There's nothing complicated, but you do need to come along and see what it's all about to get an idea of it. So that's my story. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to it and let me garble on about it. If there's anybody's got any questions, now would be a good time to ask them.
Well, I'll interject here quickly, Steve.